We will now discuss logical functions, which you can use to perform logical tests on the values in cells and then return a result based on whether or not the value in the cell passed or failed the test. Logical formulas take the form of an if-then-else statement. You must know at least 3 different arguments before you can write a logical formula. First, the logical test that you want to apply to the cell. Second, the cell value or formula to return if the test returns a true value or passes the logical test. And finally, the cell value or formula to return if the test returns a false value or fails the logical test. When you write a logical function, it must have a certain syntax. Generally speaking, that is equals if, then an open parenthesis, then the logical test, then a comma, then the true response, then a comma, and then a false response with a closing parenthesis. Note that if you want the formula to display a text response for the true response or the false response, then you must place the response inside of double quotation marks. If you want the cell to display dates, those must be enclosed within pound signs. The only time you wouldn't mark the type of value to return is if you want the cell to display a numerical result or calculate a formula. A nested logical function is one that places the cell through a second logical test if it fails the first. These functions are useful for determining the value of a cell by placing it through several different tests, displaying different results based on which test it passes. You can nest up to 64 additional if statements behind your original. The syntax for 2 nested if statements, generally speaking, would be equals if, open parenthesis, the first logical test, comma, then the true response, comma, then if, then an open parenthesis, then the second logical test, comma, then the true response, comma, then the false response, followed by 2 closing parentheses using that example. Now you must remember to close all of the open parentheses for every if statement that you nest within the logical function at the end of the formula. So using the example that I spoke of, in this case, since there would be 2 if statements, there would be 2 closing parentheses at the end of the formula. On screen you can see 3 different nested if statements, so in this example shown on screen there are 3 closing parentheses. Often it's the case that you will want to know if a cell meets multiple criteria. You can use the and or functions to find this out. The AND function will return a true value if the cell being evaluated passes all of the tests listed after the AND function. The OR function will return a true value if the cell being evaluated passes any of the logical tests that follow the OR function. Note that you can evaluate up to 255 different logical tests after the AND OR statements. When you look at how you can combine these tests with the if function or many nested if functions, you begin to see how you can start to become a very powerful formula creator. Now you can run cells through a battery of tests and then decide what function to perform or value to display based on the results shown from the tests. The general syntax when combining the if function with the and or function would be as follows. So first, equals if, open parenthesis, and, open parenthesis, logical test 1, comma, logical test 2, comma, logical test 3, comma, and so forth, close parenthesis, then a comma, then the true response, then a comma, then the false response, and finally a close parenthesis. Or using the OR statement, it would be equals if, open parenthesis, or, open parenthesis, logical test 1, comma, logical test 2, comma, and so forth, close parenthesis, comma, true response, comma, false response, close parenthesis.